The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Too many dollars chasing too few goods.
Tonight on Politics Now, Republican congressional candidate Mark Robertson talks to us about his campaign, inflation, immigration, and his military background.
It's going to get even more relentless. The spending that we've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg.
Piles of money being spent on political ads, while Las Vegas could be ground zero for spending this year. And a nursing shortage, how Nevada joining an interstate agreement could help ease the strain.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. Former President Donald Trump is in Las Vegas this weekend, stumping for Republican Senate candidate Adam Laxalt and gubernatorial candidate Joe Lombardo. Mr. Trump held an event Friday night at Treasure Island for about 200 donors and supporters. He's already endorsed both candidates, Laxalt and Lombardo. Now, the event happened after we recorded this program. You can check 8newsnow.com for more on the former president's speech. Current Governor Steve Sisolak is spending some of his war chest for the campaign funding. He's out with a new ad called Two Economies.
Hotels are full, unemployment's low, and our economy is rated best in America. But there's another story, too. Housing prices, gas, groceries, all taking a toll. I get it.
Governor Sisolak goes on in this ad to tout the state's American Rescue Plan spending on affordable housing and child care. His campaign has already placed a $1 million general election ad reservation. Joe Lombardo's campaign, the Republican, they have responded. It says Sisolak is all actually right on this one. There is a tale of two economies in our country. There are states whose governors managed their economies well throughout COVID and those that didn't. The statement says Nevada falls into the latter category. So, bottom line, there's a lot of money already being spent on political ads here in Nevada, and UNLV political science assistant Professor Kenneth Miller tells us you're going to start seeing a lot more. I spoke with him about money and Nevada's races that have the country's eye this year.
All the funding that is filing in campaign funding, the ad revenue, the commercials are relentless. What are you seeing in terms of where the money is coming from and where it's going already here in Nevada?
Well, I think you're right. The advertising is already relentless, but what I'm seeing suggests that it's going to get even more relentless. That the spending that we've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg. So if we look back to previous election cycles where we had races in Nevada that were similar to this one in terms of how close they were and what was at stake nationally for them, where we're not even close to how much money we're going to see eventually. Think back to 2018, Jackie Rosen runs against Dean Heller, and in that race, there was $65 million was spent on Jackie Rosen's side and $38 million on Dean Heller's side. 2/3 of that money came from outside groups, that is independent expenditure groups. And that's probably what we're going to see here again this time. Anywhere from 2/3, maybe as much as 3/4 of the money is going to come from these national independent expenditure organizations. In terms of how much is going to be spent, 2020 we saw even more than 2018 in terms of spending, where races like this one had about $100 million spent on average. So we're not even close to that yet. So if you think you've seen a lot of political messaging so far, just wait until you get to Labor Day.
I'm sure most viewers will find that profoundly fantastic. You know, that I guess that speaks not only to, you know, for those of us in Nevada, it's an important race, obviously, but for if these national organizations are stepping in, they see Nevada as very important. That's been the case for the last several cycles. Is it just the Senate race or the governor's race that's getting all the attention, or does the money assign that it's those congressional races too that are going to get a lot of the focus and a lot of the money?
Yeah, we're going to start to see more on the House races soon, most likely. We have several House races this year that are going to be very close. We have Dina Titus's seat, used to be a very safe seat for her. It's not as safe anymore. So she's going to need to campaign. She has Mark Robertson running against her, who he's probably going to draw some money and he's going to be active. We have, of course, Susie Lee and April Becker. That's already a pretty active race, and that's going to get even more so. We haven't seen much from Nevada 4 yet, but that's partially because we're here in the southern part of the state, so we don't see as much of that activity. But 3 out of 4 of our House races are going to be in the ballpark of close, and 2 of them should be very close. We're going to see a lot there. The Senate race is going to be the biggest one, though, in terms of spending. National outside groups are most interested in that. They're more interested in the Senate seat than they are who's sitting in the governor's mansion. You go back prior to 2010, money couldn't move around very easily. Now money can move wherever the races are close. And there's only 2 other Senate races besides Nevada that are considered this tight. That's Arizona and Georgia. So we're going to be the focus of attention.
You can see our full discussion with Professor Miller on 8newsnow.com. So now to the race for Congress. You just heard it referenced in that last interview. Former Army Colonel Mark Robertson is the Republican nominee in Congressional District 1. It was one of the safest Democratic districts in the U.S., but the boundaries were recently redrawn. Now Republicans think they have a chance to unseat incumbent Democrat Dina Titus. I spoke with Robertson about the race and the issues. Let's talk a little bit about your background. What is it about your military service, your business career that you think suits you well as a congressman?
Good. Well, I'd say there's 3 things. First, I have deep ties to the district. My wife and I raised our family in the 1st Congressional District. I owned a business in the district. We went to church in the district, shopped, played. I coached Little League in the district. So we have deep ties to CD1. 2 is I have national service. I served for 30 years in the Army. I enlisted as a private and retired as a colonel. One of my last assignments was to the Pentagon, where I served in the Office of the Secretary of Defense for policy. So I've worked on national level policy.
How would you address inflation if you're elected to Congress?
Good. I have a degree in finance and an MBA. In fact, I taught finance at UNLV. I know how the economy works, and I know how to fix inflation. It's not that difficult. Inflation is when there's too many dollars chasing too few goods. We had government spending, horrendous amount of government spending and printing, borrowing, and spending money we didn't have. And then we had a government shutdown that shut down our factories, and so we weren't producing the goods that people need. That will naturally lead to inflation.
So would you support a balanced budget amendment or make an enforcement of a balanced budget? And I guess looking back, what were your thoughts on the efforts to put money into the system, the PPP and sort of the coronavirus pandemic relief funding from the White House?
Yeah, well, the audits are going on now about all of that money that was injected into the system, and so much of it was wasted in fraud. I mean, we were sending stimulus checks to people in prison. And the stimulus checks weren't targeted to the people who were most injured. It was just this broad distribution of money to people, and many of those people didn't need it. I talked to members of people who work for the government, and they said, I never lost a paycheck. I don't know why I got a stimulus check.
Let's talk about another issue here that you mentioned is key. You believe in District 1, the issue of immigration, illegal immigration. We've seen some horrible stories from down on the border the last couple of weeks. How do you think illegal immigration is not only affecting District 1, but the country, and what would you like to do about it?
Yeah, so we see a flood of drugs, gangs, and guns coming across our borders. I have a personal friend who lost his daughter to fentanyl poisoning, and that fentanyl is coming across our border. It's not just people, it is drugs and guns and gangs that are coming across those borders. Those affect the people in CD1.
So what's the solution?
We got to secure our borders. We've got to finish the wall, and we've got to use electronic monitoring, and then we've got to give the Border Patrol agents, the people on the ground, the resources they need to keep the criminals out of our country. Once we've controlled our border, then we need to fix our broken immigration system.
If you're elected into Congress, is there any level of abortion support, federal funding, or anything along those lines that you can, that you are in favor of? Okay,
first, I'm unequivocally pro-life. I believe, with the majority of Americans, that there should be limits on abortion, that abortion shouldn't be unlimited. And I applaud the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, not just because I'm pro-life, but because it was the right thing to do in our Constitution. Even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that there were some issues and some concerns with how the Roe decision was made. So the Roe decision, the overturning Roe, put the power back to the people, where it belongs. It doesn't belong to the federal government, it belongs with the people. And I'm surprised to see so many career politicians complaining that power was taken from them and given to the people. That's where it belongs.
You can watch our entire interview with Colonel Robertson and interviews with other candidates at 8newsnow.com. Just look for the political news tab. A new Monmouth University poll shows most people are concerned about their wallets and the direction of the country, the economy. 48% listed either inflation or gas prices as their biggest worry right now. Those were also the biggest concerns across a wide variety of demographics. Abortion came in at 5%. 57% also said the actions of the federal government over the past 6 months, they say, have hurt their family. The Biden administration has signed an executive order on abortion access that happened on Friday morning. The executive order tells federal government agencies to push back on efforts to limit the ability for women to access federally approved abortion medication or to travel across state lines to abortion clinics. Next year on Politics Now, finding more nurses.
There is a shortage, primarily due to people taking a break from the profession.
It's burnout. Next on Politics Now, the head of UNLV's nursing school talks about a new measure which could help with a nursing shortage. Plus, a new federal operation to crack down on a spike in violence.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Early bill draft requests for the 2023 legislative session have been posted. It starts on February 6th. The initial drafts just have a rough outline at this point, though. On the Republican side, State Senator Joe Hardy has a proposal to amend the Constitution to limit property taxes. State Senator James Settlemyre has a draft for a state tax holiday. It would kick in when the gas price, plus the state tax rather, gas plus the state tax reaches a certain price per gallon, but the measure doesn't specify a price. Assemblyman Greg Hafen has a voter ID proposal. Democrat State Senator Dina Neal has a proposal to penalize school administrators who don't follow the new pupil-centered funding plan. It would make other changes to school administration as well. Another from State Senator James Orenshaw would toughen penalties for catalytic converter thefts. Well, nurses have worked long hours in tough conditions all throughout the coronavirus pandemic, and many are leaving the profession because of it. I spoke with the dean of UNLV's Nursing College, Angela Amar. We discussed the problem and an interstate agreement that could help. How much of a shortage is there right now in Southern Nevada of nurses?
There is a shortage, primarily due to people taking a break from the profession.
Is burnout.
Burnout, right. And we've graduated consistently through the pandemic, as have the other nursing schools. So we've continued to produce the same amount of nurses. They've all been hired immediately. They're all on jobs. But we are seeing where new graduate nurses or suddenly our newer graduates are now the experts on units because there's this lack of depth of expertise. People who could retire have retired, and other people have left.
And not that they're not well trained, certainly, but there's an experience level there that might be lacking. I don't know if lacking is the right way to describe it.
No, but that is the gap, right? Yeah. I think that is the gap, that you went from having all these people who were working and progressing, and then you lose this, and so suddenly your newer graduates are now the senior folk who are training the newest graduate.
So is there a solution, or is it just sort of, you know, trial by fire?
I mean, I think that we saw certainly the nurses being made into commodities. It's like we need nurses. We talk about beds and, you know, how many beds in a hospital, but beds need nurses to work those beds, or else they're not really valuable. And we've gone from this thing of nurses for hire, bringing in nurses from other states, we can pay them more. Our nurses then leaving to work someplace else to be paid more. I mean, the recognition of the feeling valued, the love from your home institution has felt sort of lacking. And there are strategies that people can take to prevent burnout that hospitals can use. When nurses feel valued, when they have voice, when they have shared governance, all those things make people stay on the job more.
So let's talk about something that is somewhat political, something that was discussed a little while ago in an interim committee with state lawmakers, this idea of a nursing licensure compact. Sounds a little technical here, but essentially it's a group of states all grouping together to help share resources to some extent. Can you explain what this is? Nevada's not a part of it right now.
Nevada's not a part, and we've tried periodically, and it looks like we may be trying again. The nursing compact, licensure compact, is a way of making, I would say, standardizing or upping the game of nursing practice across the country. When you think about it, nursing schools are educating students with the kind of a core curriculum that our accreditors require. And we all take the same licensure test to get our license. But with each state having their own rules agreements, it means that nurses work differently across states. And what we're really looking for is a way to have nurses work at the top of their license, full scope of license, that really benefits patients. And so 37 states joining in this have said, we agree that we're going to have this standard, and that all the states that are part of us agree to this standard, work with this standard.
Why aren't more states involved? 37 means there's a fair chunk of them that are not part of this. Can you at least touch on why there might be some hesitation in the nursing community to being a part of this?
I think nurses as a whole like the idea of compacts. Some of the concerns people have are are more about disciplinary things. So people are concerned about if there are nurses who have problems in one state, then suddenly you've opened the door for them to bring those problems to our state. People often verbalize that maybe we'll lose control over what happens within our state. I would say 37 is well over half, and so and it's been a journey, probably since 2010 or something, that we've really been moving at how can we make nursing practice the same across the country.
Sort of standardizing it,
versus
essentially.
States.
Yeah.
And so most of the fears that people have, the data doesn't bear out, and data doesn't show that this is really a legitimate concern.
Our efforts to speak with local nursing unions and state lawmakers on this were unsuccessful. Utah and Arizona are part of the Nursing Interstate Compact. Next on Politics Now, stopping violent crime, the new federal operation to try and crack down on crime spikes in major cities.
Vegas. Good luck.
You're watching Politics Now.
The Biden administration is facing mounting pressure to address a spike in violent crime in major cities. Alexandra Limon explores the steps the administration is taking to address that and what officials would like to see.
The Justice Department says it has been working to combat violent crime and that a 30-day operation carried out by the U.S. Marshal Service resulted in a large number of arrests, including of 3 suspects in connection with the mass shooting on Philadelphia's South Street. The Justice Department says in June, federal law enforcement arrested 1,500 violent criminals through something called Operation North Star,
which is an example of our efforts to protect our communities from violence and gun violence.
Attorney General Merrick Garland says the operation focused on criminals wanted for the most serious offenses, including homicide, in 10 major U.S. cities.
This initiative reflects the anti-violent crime initiative that we've had in place since the beginning of 2021.
However, officials say the country continues to deal with crime issues, notably with ongoing mass shootings. Most recently, a gunman opened fire from a rooftop on a crowd celebrating Independence Day in Highland Park, Illinois. So far, authorities say 7 people have died.
20 minutes from the house I grew up in. It's just another horrific reminder of the violence and particularly the gun violence that we face.
Authorities say that gunman has now confessed to the crime, and he had AR-15 style weapons. President Biden and Vice President Harris are renewing their calls to ban assault weapons. And that's a call that Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhart echoes.
A ban of these types of weapons between 1994 and 2004. Everything shows that these types of horrifying, devastating incidents went down during that time.
But right now, there appears to be no appetite among Republican lawmakers to ban assault weapons. Last month, Congress did pass new gun laws that include expanding background checks and encouraging states to pass red flag laws, as well as dedicating more funding to mental health. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Republican Senate candidate Adam Laxalt's annual Basque Fry is adding more guests. Former acting U.S. Attorney General under President Trump, Matthew Whitaker, is scheduled to attend. Senator Texas Cruz from Texas is also speaking at the event. This is held up in Gardnerville every August. Next on 8 News Now, remembering 1 October, how you can weigh in on what happens at the site of the worst mass shooting in American history. This is Politics.
Weekdays on CBS.
You're watching Politics Now.
Clark County leaders are now accepting ideas for a permanent 1 October memorial. This is, of course, the Healing Garden. You can submit those ideas on the Clark County website. The deadline is September 30th. Later this year, a design team will be chosen, and a formal recommendation on those plans could happen in late summer next year. Clark County is also hosting informational sessions about this process later this week and next week as well. This week in What to Watch, rent control is on the agenda. The city of North Las Vegas has a special city council meeting next Tuesday to verify the signature on a culinary union-backed rent control initiative. It is being dubbed Neighborhood Stability by the union. We will let you know how that goes forward. That'll do it for us here on Politics Now. We thank you for joining us here. Of course, we're back with you next Saturday. For all the latest in the political news, just head to 8newsnow.com. Have a good rest of your weekend. We'll be back with you next Saturday. Take care.